through his work with high conflict personalities, New Ways for Family, and his many, many books on parenting, the newest, and all the books that he's written over the years. So again, congratulations, Bill Eddy, and we so appreciate your contributions to family mediation. I think we ought to do a little bit of applause for him as well. Bill Eddy, what a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful recipient of the Star Award. I also want to thank my committee members, Marvin Whistler, Steve Newman, Lynette Kim, Deborah Dupree, Lucia Johnson, and Susan Guthrie for their support and service. And we're sharing with you here, here's a little picture of us at one of our planning meetings. And, you know, just like this meeting, it was a new experience working that way, but we got a lot done, and I can't thank them enough. And they also, the planning committee also includes Bouvier Yulin, SCMA's new executive director, and also her assistant, Taisha Preston. And Bouvier has taken on her new position with great enthusiasm and skill, and I want to thank her for her support. And you'll be hearing from Bouvier throughout the day. Consider Bouvier our virtual tour guide. Finally, I want to thank each of you who are joining us either for the first time or this could be your fourth time. So at this time, I'm going to ask you to engage in a little bit of an interactive exercise. And Bouvier, if you could go to the next slide. There we go. Okay, that's our schedule, but the exercise is this. Let's put your hands up. You're here today, so you're here for the fourth conference, but keep them up. Keep them up. Come on, you guys, you got to join me on this. A little bit of interaction. Keep them up if you also went last year. All right. All right. And now how about those of you who made it to our second year? And those of you who are also at year one. All right. So look, whether you're last man standing here, so keep them up, or if this is just your first time, thank you for joining us. And we enjoy having you every year. And if this is your first year, I think we'll see you again. All right, so now I've got the schedule up here that I've asked Bouvier to show you, just so that you get a little bit of a roadmap of what's going to happen today for our plenary events, our workshops, and I want to highlight where you can do some of your own exploring and create your own path before joining us on the plenary trail. Our journey will start with keynote speaker John Fisk. He will be coming to us from Boston. Do we have a slide for him? John will be our guide into the new frontier of marital mediation. We will learn what it is and how he's incorporated marital mediation into his practice. We'll have more information on him in a minute, since he's going to kick off our morning session. After John's presentation, we will arrive at the first fork in the road. You will have your choice of 2 workshops. In workshop 1A, you can visit Israel and hear from one of the pioneers in family mediation in Israel. You will learn about the new reforms in that country that are expanding early dispute resolution and forever changing the way courts handle divorce in that country. Or you might be interested in joining workshop 1B on modern love, where you'll be able to hear from a California family law attorney and a New York family law attorney who are going to look at how divorce mediation is being impacted every day by the current culture where millennials are changing the face of divorce and where artificial reproductive technologies have changed what it means to be a parent. Following the morning detours, we ask that you return to the main group and join us for our brown bag lunch networking event. It will be hosted by SCMA board members Marvin Whistler and Lucia Johnson. Show us your hands, Marvin and Lucia, so we can see who you are. So we really do hope, join us early if you're going to do that, so we can get you into breakout rooms. All right, now our afternoon workshop choices include workshop 2A on the financial issues that you might encounter in a gray divorce, or you can join workshop 2B and learn how our virtual post-COVID world and the evolution in mediation practices has impacted not only the practice of mediation, but who we are and how we feel. Following our afternoon workshops, we will have our closing plenary presented by this year's SCMA Star Award recipient, Bill Eddy, author of many books and the founder of High Conflict Institute. He will present a brand new presentation that he has prepared just for this conference. Our journey will end at 3:30, and we hope that at the end of the day, you will have been inspired, and that by joining us on our exploratory excursion, that you will discover exciting new frontiers for your mediation practice, whether it is simply incorporating a new skill, whether you have a new focus for your mediation practice. So set your compass, grab your map, and let's get started as we explore new frontiers in family mediation. Now, I hope I see is Layla in the group here, because I do want to give just Layla Balakane a brief moment here to tell us about the SCMA Professional Development Group for Family Mediators. We're really excited to be adding this among the SCMA programs. So Layla, can you give us a little bit of an overview of how we can become a part of this new group?
Well, good morning, everyone. Lynette, Kim, and I are co-hosting the SCMA Professional Development Group for Family Mediators. We have many inspiring leaders in family mediation joining us as guest speakers. And during each meeting, they will provide us essential practice-specific skills related to the field of family mediation. We just had our first meeting this past week, and we will continue to meet every second Wednesday of the month. And our next meeting is going to be on March 10th. So if you're interested, you can try it for 2 sessions before you become an SCA member. The information to sign up for next PDG event will be emailed to everyone who has registered for FMI. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing you there.
All right, thank you. And I also wanted to say that you can also find information about that PDG just on the SCMA website, where we have a calendar with all kinds of events. The other thing that's really exciting about this PDG is it's the first time that we've done it for a particular field. So, you know, that's part of our virtual world, is that PDGs used to be geographic groups, but now we're able to pick, and now we have one just for family law. So you might see different field, different PDGs popping up. So again, we hope you join us next month. And again, what was that date, Layla, of the next meeting?
March 10th.
March 10th. Okay, thank you. And that's from 6 to 8, I think?
It's from, yes. It's supposed to be 6 to 7:30, but this time we went to 6 to 8. So.
All right, great. All right, so now at this time, before I introduce our keynote speaker, we will hear from from Mike Fonseca from SoberLink, who is the diamond sponsor for our opening plenary. Mike?
Terry, thank you. And Bouvier, thank you again for having me. Mike Fonseca with SoberLink, National Sales Manager, live from Texas. SoberLink is an alcohol monitoring company. It's an FDA cleared medical device, both hardware and software. We've been in business for 10 years now. If you've never seen our product, I'm holding it in my hand. It's a small handheld product that you blow into. It simultaneously takes your photograph. We redirect that information in real time to a HIPAA compliant web portal, store it indefinitely, and you can use those records for court hearings for particular individuals that are struggling with alcohol use disorder. For family law, it's specific to cases where alcohol is a problem, and we're able to keep people accountable, gaining trust back with loved ones to make sure that the child is number one in a safe environment, but keeping people accountable in real time. Historically, people have been using urine analysis, ignition interlocks, products that are great and they've always been used, but it's after the fact. And now with technology, you're able to monitor someone in real time, not only just for parenting time, which we offer programs just for parenting time only, but for full-time abstinence. We're the only company that offers tamper detection, so it's impossible to game the device. Again, in real-time results. But the important factors are what are important as the matrimonial professional. It allows peace of mind knowing that we're a government grade product that is acceptable in all 50 states in all courtrooms as a product used for alcohol abstinence. For the concerned parties, it's really peace of mind. The parent that's concerned about their child with the person who's got a potential alcohol problem, it's peace of mind knowing that their child is safe while they're involved in unsupervised visitations. For the matrimonial professional, it just is peace of mind, and we're documenting history of abstinence and able to keep people accountable, like I mentioned. We are direct to client, like I mentioned, and if you need more assets and resources, you can reach us at our website at soberlink.com under family law. We have a professionals tab that you can drop down and use printable assets, which has verbiage for agreements, best practices, as well as sample agreements for orders if you need them for specific attorneys to create orders for alcohol abstinence. I want to thank everyone. What an exciting itinerary that I just saw, Terry, and I wish everyone a fantastic day. Again, thank you for having me. And if you need any resources, again, just look at us at soberlink.com.
All right. Thanks so much, Mike.
Absolutely. Great to see everyone.
All right. It's my privilege to introduce to you John Fisk, attorney and mediator, who is coming to us from Boston, where he is the partner at the firm of Healy, Fisk, Richmond, and Matthew. About 99% of his practice is devoted to mediation. He also conducts mediation training. Like many of our California pioneers, he's been practicing mediation since the 70s. He estimates that he has mediated about 2,000 divorces, separations, and contracts to stay married since 1979. Early in his career, John coined the term marital mediation when he discovered that he could use his skills as a mediator to give couples a place that they could talk without engaging in couples counseling or therapy. He found that he could help them learn how to improve communication and gain a deeper understanding of their relationship. Or he could help them negotiate new terms for their marriage and assist them in using mediation to enter into written post-marital contracts defining their own solutions. Many of us has probably thought at one time or another in the midst of a divorce mediation, if only this couple had come to me when they were married, maybe we wouldn't be here today. True, some of you have experienced that. I know I have. It's also likely that many of you have done this work for some time. You may have even heard a client say that, gee, I wish I'd seen you. So it's really interesting that not only though did John think about these things, but he incorporated marital mediation as an integral part of his mediation practice. Before I turn things over to John, John has asked me to advise you that he wants to hear from you and that he's going to leave plenty of time at the end of his presentation to find out which of you in the audience may already be using marital mediation. I know it's a really new field, but I think I have a hunch that there's a few of you out there that already have incorporated it into your practices. So if that's you, please share with us when John allows that opportunity at the end of his presentation. So please join me now in welcoming John.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
The perseverance is a word that should be familiar to you if you've been listening to what NASA's been doing on the planet Mars, but it also applies to all of you because in order to become a mediator is required perseverance. And if you decide you want to help couples stay married, persevere, because you can. So the evolution of marital mediation came about from what Terry has already talked about. You're discovering as a mediator that you help people talk. And how many of you have been sitting with a couple and after the first or second meeting, they say to you, you know, if we had only come to you sooner, we wouldn't be here. I'm a lawyer, not a therapist, but I help write contracts. And so after listening to this, to couples for many years say to me, you know, if we had only come to you sooner, we might not be doing this. I'm explaining this to my wife after about 10 years, she said, well, why don't you help people stay married? And my initial reaction was, I can't do that. I'm not a therapist. And besides, Massachusetts is not clear that married couples have the power to enter into contracts. And probably when you became a mediator, some of your friends said, you're a meditator? Or what is this that you're doing? And yet you persevered. And now we have 77 participants that I'm talking to. And of you 77, you all know exactly what I'm talking about. So it was not unfamiliar to me after 10 years that people would be questioning again, what do you mean you're going to help couples stay married? You can't do that. You're in Connecticut, which is very territorial. We're training marital mediators in Connecticut, and some of the therapists are saying, you can't do that. You're trespassing on therapeutic territory. I say, I'm not practicing therapy. I'm helping people enter into contracts. And I love contracts. I like to write contracts. And I write contracts in plain English, as you will see from the materials, because there are some models of marital mediation contracts that I've written that are in your materials. But back to 1980. So I start mediating for couples who want to stay married. And I write an article about it in Lawyers Weekly. And unlike 1979, when I first started writing about mediation and lawyers said, you can't do that, you're representing both parties, that's against the law. This response this time was very favorable, and the press loved it. And word got around that there was a lawyer who was helping couples stay married. And eventually I end up on the front page of the Boston Globe. I got a call from NPR Marketplace, who did a show about one of my marital mediations. And I don't have to go on about that. I'm much more interested in helping you 77 people engage in this and get a dialogue going and how you can do this. In order to help you do that, I've included in the materials some of the contracts that I've written. And these contracts take all different forms because of the issue that presents itself to couples who learn, you mean we can help, we can use mediation to help us stay married? How does that work? I got a lot of help in dealing with my dubious colleagues when our Supreme Judicial Court resolved a question that it never had resolved before. In 2004, they decided it's all right for married couples to enter into binding legal agreements as long as there is no fraud and no duress. And unlike a divorce, where in Massachusetts, and I'm sure true in other states, you don't have to have a lawyer to present your agreement in the court if you want to get a divorce. It's not true for a premarital agreement, and it certainly is not true for a postmarital agreement. If you decide you want to help a couple mediate to save their marriage, you want to make sure that each of them has a lawyer who's advising them from the get-go. And part of your art one of the things you discover as a mediator is the art of referral, the art of having couples refer people to you, and your art in referring people to other professionals. One of the things that's helped me overcome skepticism in the mass bar about my mediating is lawyers who were skeptical about mediation discovering I'm a great referral source for them. So back to marital mediation. Terry has an article about me in Money Magazine, which Terry, I don't know if you want to put it on the screen or not, but this article here appeared in Money Magazine in 1988, and it's on the wall of my office. And a couple's in my office who they've come in to get divorced, and he goes to the men's room. She gets up, she goes over to the wall, and she reads this article. And her husband comes back in the room, and she says, "Joe, this guy can help us stay married." And he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "If you want to, you can have lawyers who will support this. You can use this process to help you negotiate a contract that would help you stay married." And that was the beginning of a year-long process in which we had many meetings. They had a lot of property. They both quickly concluded they did not want to get a divorce. They wanted to live apart, but not get divorced. They had 2 children, and they had a lot of property to divide. So much of the discussion was spent in how to divide the property. And they had lawyers who were very supportive. And I helped to arrange that. And it's as you know, there are lawyers and there are lawyers. So it was very important that there were lawyers who were supportive of this process. In fact, one of the lawyers called me up one day and said to me, "John, stop telling these couple that they're pioneers. We want them to think that what they're doing is perfectly acceptable and not something totally novel." So, and over a long process, they ended up negotiating. For example, he was a professor who had earned a lot of money advising a company, and they agreed they wanted to divide everything equally. But the wife said, "You put so much," to the husband, "you put so much time and effort into your helping this company. I think you should have more of it than I do. And I want you," the wife says to the husband, "to decide what the percentage will be." As you may know, if you do negotiations, making a proposal is an opportunity, but it's also a huge responsibility. And he agonized over that proposal he was going to make to his wife. And finally, he proposed to her, I think it would be fair if I kept 2/3 and you kept 1/3. And she said, "I totally agree." Then he said to her, "I am so happy we're doing this way. I want to pay you alimony within the marriage. Can I do that?" He said, "Yes, if you want to file separate tax returns, you can do that. Or you can share a joint liability and as if you were." But then he said, "My problem is I hate writing checks. So I'm not going to write you 12 checks. Once a year, I will write you a check for $50,000 just because I'm so happy that we're doing this." And then they had to decide, when are you going to do this? And if we were sitting in a room all together, I would ask you, guess what date they picked? And I don't know how interactive this is, and time is too precious to play a guessing game. Anyway, they ended up deciding on her birthday, every year he would write her a check for $50,000. Now, this happened in about 1990. And he called me about 3 weeks ago. He has stayed in touch with me. I helped them find a good financial planner, and they loved the financial planner so much that they made her the trustee for their children, one of whom became a jet pilot in the Navy, the daughter. And so I almost became part of the family. So 2 weeks ago, and I think it was after Terry first called me about this, the husband called me and said his wife had just died. So you become part of what we become part of all we have met, and we become very involved in this, in the lives of our clients in ways we will never know. So other examples of cases are in your materials, and I love to talk about, I love to write agreements. And as an example of how creative you can be, there's in your agreement is, in your materials is an agreement I wrote called a Civil Conversations Agreement. And every time the word S appears in that title, it's a $. Because this couple came to me, they did not want to get a divorce. Both of them very much wanted to stay married, though unfortunately he had difficulty talking because he was dying of cancer of the tongue, which is a horrible disease. You can't replace a tongue. So he had trouble talking, but she talked a lot. And it's hard for spouses to talk for each other. And you spend a lot of time as a mediator as a divorce mediator, especially, as you know, telling the husband, you can't talk for your wife, or telling the wife, you can't talk for your husband. In this case, she had to talk for him. And she did a very good job of that. Well, they argued a lot about money and how they were going to pay the bills. And she came up with it. They agreed, we'll pay the bills, but he had an income and she didn't. So she told him, well, I'll just borrow against my inheritance. And so we wrote that into the agreement, and I get a call from her father saying, John, who by the way, loved her son-in-law and wanted very much for them to stay married. And I don't know how tongue-in-cheek the father or the wife was, but he called me and said, John, I understand my daughter is entering into an agreement that you're writing in which I'm supposed to finance it by advancing money for her inheritance. Don't you think that's a little presumptuous? So as a mediator, how would you answer that? Well, perseverance, and it helps having tact. So I had a lovely conversation with the father he was very much for this marriage to succeed. And again, when the husband eventually died, I went to the memorial service and I got to meet the father, and he was a lovely man, and he was very grateful for my efforts to help them stay married, which they did. But so those are two examples. And I would like to, as soon as possible, be available to answer any questions that any of you have. So if any of you out there want to weigh in on this, I want to add a couple of things. I've been training divorce. Yeah,
John,
I just want to add a word about training.
But you were going to talk about that trip that led to the marital mediation, and we have a slide of that we wanted to share.
Well, how did I get to be a mediator? That's what led.
Well, you were actually, this is the slide of the bike trip.
Well, this is the only reason this picture is up here is because Terry decided that the theme, or somebody did, the theme of your conference is exploring with a map and a compass. Well, I'm a lawyer. I was a lawyer in New York. We decided we didn't want to raise children in New York City where I was living. And my wife and I moved to Boston, and I became a lawyer for Choate Hall and Stewart. Then I became a lawyer for the city of Boston, and I represented the Boston Police Department right after Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy were killed. It was a great time to represent police departments. I spent a lot of time meeting with demonstrators and helping them arrange peaceful demonstrations. And the Supreme Judicial Court invited me to become the state court administrator. So I did that, and it was a very difficult job. In Massachusetts, the courts were run by the legislature in many ways. It's hard to administer a court system, if any of you have ever tried. So in 1978, my wife and I decided, let's take our kids out of school for a year, and we'll bicycle through Europe and backpack in Asia. And I was 42 years old. My father said, you can't do that. You're at the peak of your earning power. You can't just drop out. I did, and he became very supportive. So anyway, we ended up, here we are bicycling through Europe. That's me on the left, my daughter on to my right, and then a cousin who turned out to become a great triathlete as a result of this. We're in England trying to figure out where the hell we are and where we're going to go. And I thought Terry would find that as a good symbol for where you all are in your careers and contemplating marital mediation. So that's why that picture is there. And so when I left in this year, the first half of the year, all I did was think about keeping everybody safe. My dear colleague, Judge Ginsburg of the probate court in Massachusetts, when I got back, became very supportive. And he loves to tell people that we went around the world. We didn't. We went to Nepal, turned around and came back. But as he says, when fact becomes legend, tell the legend. So the legend is the fish went around the world. Anyway, in Nepal, we start coming back and I begin to think, what the hell am I going to do when I get back to Massachusetts? And I thought, well, maybe I'll be a writer. So I spent a day in the consulate or embassy in Kathmandu reading about writers and read that if you're really, really good, you might earn $44,000 a year. And I said, forget that. I'm going to have to be a lawyer when I get back. So my wife said, you're really good at helping people communicate. And why don't you use those skills to figure out some way to help people get divorced peacefully? So Goethe says, when you commit yourself to something, providence takes over. I come back to Boston in the summer of 1979, and the Boston Bar Association has just written the first ethical opinion in the country saying it's okay for a lawyer to mediate a divorce as long as the lawyer does two things. And the two things the lawyer has to do are, one, not represent either one of them, and two, tell both of them you each have a right to your own lawyer. As long as you do that, you can be a divorce mediator. Well, a lot of lawyers didn't like that. I was lucky in Boston. The Boston Bar family section was very supportive. New York, forget it. People in New York had a terrible time. The bar was very opposed to mediation. But I was lucky. And I had this ethical opinion, which I still carry with me. It's in my briefcase right now as we sit here. And it spawned many other ethical opinions. Colorado is still arguing about whether can a lawyer really be a divorce mediator. But so I became a divorce mediator, and it was very successful in Boston. A lot of lawyers were very supportive and a lot of therapists. And there was a wonderful guy named Jerry Weinstein who had started a group called the Divorce Resource and Mediation Center. So all this was there for me. And perseverance helped, but it was also, I was very fortunate in the timing of when I came back. And that's part of what Terry wanted me to tell you, is that if you decide you want to do something, commit yourself to it and providence takes over. And so if any of you 77 people who are thinking of committing yourself to marital mediation, go ahead, do it and delight in it. And you will get great personal satisfaction. Your clients will be very grateful. And if you persevere, and if you're good at it and you love doing it, there are people out there right now who are looking for you. So how's that, Terry?
Great. Listen, how about we have a good slide of the resources that John's provided. And John, I'm going to have him pop up that, and I'd love you to talk about some more about the resources that you were telling me about, in particular, some of the authors that have written a lot in this area and that you found helpful. And in particular, I know we talked about Gottman's book, but and you were also wanted to talk about Michelle Weiner Davis. Could you, we've got that up on the screen now. These are the resources that John has provided. And John, I'd love to hear more about those.
Yeah, we'll walk through that very quickly. We won't spend much time on the Fogg case. That decided in 1991. We're not going to deal with whether there was a good marital agreement because Geraldine Fogg tricked her husband. She said to her husband, "You want to get a divorce? If you pay me $50,000, we can stay married." So he did. He paid her $50,000 and she promptly filed for a divorce. And the Supreme Judicial Court said that was a fraud, and we're not going to decide now whether that agreement was a good agreement. Then in 2010, they answered the question I wanted to have answered, which is, can married couples enter into contracts? And it was the Anson case that decided. It's a wonderful opinion to read because in one of the footnotes, it discusses what's the standard? What's the legal standard for testing a marital agreement? Isn't the American Law Institute says, oh, that's the same thing as a premarital agreement. Our court said, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. A fiance has a lot more negotiating power than a spouse. And therefore, when we look at the negotiating power of a spouse, we want to make sure that there was no fraud and no duress. And it is a higher standard than we apply to premarital agreements. So that's why I emphasize, if you decide you have a couple who want to use your skill as a mediator to help them stay married, make sure they have lawyers from the very beginning and either play a role in the lawyer selection or hope and pray that they pick Freddie Friendly instead of Freddie Flamethrower.
And John, I think you're talking too more that you require the lawyers if you're going to do marital agreements. I think though, if you're just helping people learn to communicate, obviously we don't want them involved.
Well, lawyers can become very involved if they're supportive of the process. And many of my marital mediation couples have come to me from lawyers who said, we don't think this couple should get divorced, and we're encouraging them to use your skills, and we'll be their backup lawyers, but you can help them communicate and work out an agreement, and we'll be supportive of that. So
okay.
Now what I discovered as soon as, in addition to, once I wrote these articles and people started, the press gets all excited, I discovered there's a whole professional world out there of people who are helping people stay married. And I start with John Gottman, there are people out there who are spending their careers helping couples deal with stay married. This is John Gottman. Some of you are familiar with John Gottman. Some of you have never heard of him. Well, he's a fascinating man. He's devoted his life to studying couples and how they negotiate. He has what he calls a marriage lab. And he says he can listen to a couple for 15 minutes and predict whether their marriage will survive or not. And I used to say it all depends upon bargaining power. And he says, no, it's more, do they treat each other with respect? Another person whose book fascinates me is Michelle Weiner Davis. This is all in your materials. This is The Divorce Remedy. And one of the reasons I love Michelle Weiner Davis is because she's the only author I find who talks about what people want. I think the most important question clients should ask themselves is, what do I want? What's most important to me? I tell people, if you don't know what you want, mediation is a dangerous process. My colleague, Diane Newman, who's a therapist, says, John, that's not the most important question the client should ask. The most important question the client should ask is, who am I? And there are books about that too. Back to Michelle Weiner Davis, who says, what do I want? If you are at all interested in deciding to use your skills as a mediator to help couples stay married, please consider getting either of those two books or both of them. There's a world of literature out there. You'll also discover a lot of colleagues who are doing the same thing. Ken Newman in New York City is also using his skills as a mediator to help couples stay divorced. My colleague, Lori Israel, took our mediation training. Then she became a marital mediator, and she and I trained marital mediators for a while. She's written a wonderful book, which I love, called The Generous Prenup. How many books have you read about generosity as a mediator? Well, Lori's book is about generosity, and she is also using her skills as a mediator as a marital mediator to train other mediators in how to help, using your mediation skills to help couples stay married. So all of this is because mediators are incredibly nice people. And Christina Robb, who used to write about mediators for the Boston Globe, said, whenever I do an article about mediators, I love it because you're the nicest group of people I deal with. Every one of you always gives me at least 2 names of other people to talk to. And that seems to be part of our tradition, is helping each other, which is why Terry devotes her life to, among other things, putting on a conference for 78 participants.
Well, actually, John, for the conference, I think Bouvier can give us that number. We've got well over 100 who actually signed up. And, you know, over the course of the 2 days, we're hoping that we've got about 110 to 120 who are visiting with us. So, you know, even better numbers. But it's just so exciting to get this information out to our community, because I know so many of us are excited to learn about it. And I know, John, that you want to turn it over and hear from our audience, but I'd still like to hear from you a little bit longer. And I think you wanted to invite Ken Newman to say a little bit about this as well. Did you want to do that? Or I can certainly find out, what's going on with our audience.
I do. And if Ken is listening, before he says anything, I just want to talk for a minute about the conference which the Academy of Family Mediators, which was preceded the Academy of Professional Family Mediators, had on Cape Cod and Falmouth on July 15th, 1997. And at that conference, it was the first time I had presented about marital mediation. I had never done a marital mediation. The day before my presentation, I had a couple sign a contract saying, we want John Fisk to help us stay married. There were about 125 people in the room to hear me talk about marital mediation. And I love, that was on July 17th, 1997. And at the end of the program, I love saying, I want every one of you to sign up. We didn't have email addresses then, or I think we were just beginning to get email addresses, because I want you all to be out there supporting each other. And I found this list in my file. This is the list of people signed. There were about 88 people on this list who signed up for being interested in marital mediation. And I hope that will grow as a result of this conference, because you all can help each other. Perseverance. Okay, thank you. I hope Ken Newman will add something.
I will. John, thanks so much.
Ken.
Hey,
Way
John.
to go, Ken.
Good to see you as always. By the way, John, why I'm here is because I saw you were speaking. I had to get on a plane very early this morning to get here, but it was worth it, certainly. Love the weather here is a lot better. In any event, I remember that 1997 talk, John, that we had to move into the biggest room we had at that conference, and everyone was buzzing. The excitement in that room was, you could measure it. It was, I don't know if you were there, Bill, but if you were at that conference, it was really just amazing. And I got excited about it, hearing John speak, and the buzz in the room, and have started doing marital mediation. I've done training in it. John and I presented at a conference. And John, I hope we can put something together to do this again, as you indicated. And John is really, it's his wife who gets all, of course, it's John's wife who gets all the credit, really, deservingly so. John, you can do this. And John did it. He started the field.
We have 78 witnesses to my pledge that we will do something together.
Yeah, and John, I'd love a copy. I don't have a copy of that sign-up sheet. I'd love if you could, when you get a chance or when I see you, to get a copy of it. We should have that on a frame somewhere for the Academy.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I will mail you a copy.
I think that I think as a group, and we have a lot of energy here, and there are people from all over, we should really start making all mediation associations, this group, other groups, state groups, national groups, should make marital mediation a front page item as a way to let people know of what we can do as mediators. It's not psychotherapy. I do couples therapy too. This is not couples therapy. It's marital mediation. And we really all need to incorporate it into our practices. We need to get the word out there. This is the way for people to see mediation as a way of life. It's a way to settle disputes. And it'll go right to divorce. It'll go to contracts. It'll go to business. It'll go to estates. It'll go to everything. It should be our front page item, marital mediation. And we have John Fisk to thank for it. And John, it's always a pleasure to see you. And I hope to see you up in Boston again soon. I always look forward to seeing the two of you.
Oh, thanks
And
so
when I
much.
was, yeah, so
Thanks, Terry.
when I was on the front page of the Boston Globe, I got a call from Howard Goldstein that morning saying, Fisk, what did you do to get on the front page of the Boston Globe? And then he said, I know what you did. You're doing something good.
So John, I'm going to leave it up to you, but I know that there are some members of our audience that we're specifically decided we want to hear from today because we know they've already been using marital mediation. And if you want, we can start. I can introduce Steve Newman, who's one of those individuals, or did you want to go a little bit longer? I know you want
No, I want to hear
minutes,
from,
so
I want to,
all right.
thank you, Terry. I'd love to hear from our audience.
So Bouvier, if you could, we've got first, let me introduce Steve Newman. He's actually probably responsible for this topic today because Steve introduced me to it and it caught my interest. And so I'm going to turn it over to Steve Newman. And Steve, tell us a little bit about the marriage team and how that
Sure,
fits into our
sure. Thank
talk
you.
today.
Before I do that, I just have to say, John, how I'm sure all of us are just mesmerized by your talk this morning. And I think you have probably 110 people who want to sign up as soon as Ken and you decide to do your marital mediation training. And I'd like to be number one on that list, if you don't mind.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
You'll hear from us, Steve.
Oh,
You'll hear from John and Ken.
I'm in, but I thought I was alone in this, and I've been blessed to have an opportunity to work on some cases with Terry. But this was one particular case that motivated me to get interested in the idea of helping clients stay together versus getting divorced. So they'd moved from South Carolina to California. They had been together more than 20 years. They were high school sweethearts. They had 2 teenage kids. So they moved to California, and within a year in California, unfortunately, all their savings were gone. They had a lot of debts. I sort of felt like they were arguing over money. Actually, one of them was a pediatrician, a lot of money coming in, but they were arguing over money. I felt like California really had broke them, and it just hit me. It just sort of was a gut punch to me. And I thought to myself, why is this couple getting a divorce? You know, maybe there's another way. You know, maybe they really should just get a financial plan together. So I put together this site. Told Tara I was going to do something. I put together a site. It's called the Marriage Team, marriageteam.com. And the idea is that helping couples that are interested in this have an opportunity to have resources to work on their marriage, again, structurally improve their marriage, not marriage therapy, but financial attorneys, therapists that work together as a team to help them get it back on track. If there's just one specific area like finance or something else that's going on that's taking that marriage off track, especially if they've been together for such a long time and seem to have a lot of positive momentum until a bump in the road, like my couple who moved, you know, from South Carolina to California, and then things didn't go well from that.
I also wanted to make sure everyone knows Steve's background. He's a CDFA, a CPA. And so, you know, I know John touched on this too. It's those financial issues that so often are damaging to marriage. And so that's where Steve liked the idea that, you know, he said, hey, I can use this CDFA skill that I've learned to help couples stay married because I can help them with these challenging financial issues. So Steve, thank you so much for sharing.
The
And then
point
John, did
Terry's
you have any
making
questions for John, for
is that
Steve?
the point Terry's making is that divorce is really planning. You have a parenting plan and you have a financial plan. And a CDFA is in a superb position to be a divorce mediator. And if you're going to mediate a divorce, why not mediate a marriage? It's all planning, 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 planning.
Great
It's about
point.
the future.
All right, now let's see, I believe Anne Marie may be in our audience, Anne Marie Cade, who's joining us from Australia. Anne, are you available to say, I know you had said you have done some things with marital mediation, but I don't know if you're here today. Are you in our group?
Yes, Terry, I'm here.
Hi,
Thank
there
you for
are.
having me.
Tell us
Hooray
about
for Australia.
yeah, from Australia, what they're doing with marital mediation, please.
Hello, everyone. It's so lovely to be here. And that was an amazing introduction to marital mediation. Thank you, John. Now, in Australia, marital mediation is in its infancy, I have to say, and we refer to it as relationship mediation. So we have a few pioneers in the field. They have been practicing family mediation for a very, very long time and see the value in relationship mediation. Now, having drawn from a lot of information from the US and John, your articles, we've looked at those, we've looked at Laurie Israel's information, and we are very, very interested in this. So the first training actually started sometime late last year, but it's an area we are very interested in working in. And I'm a accredited, nationally accredited mediator in Australia. And I've had one couple that I have worked with in this space. And I have to say it's so rewarding because it's all about helping them reach, agreements through a process of constructive communication. So if they are able to reach an agreement regarding their financial matters, then they can go to a lawyer and they prepare what's called a financial agreement, and they both have to get advice on that and sign that off. So thank you again for your delightful insight, and I'm very excited about marital mediation. So I will be in touch for sure and would love to do that training too. Thank you.
You know, my son has just moved to Brisbane.
Ah,
Oh, has he? Okay.
And
I'm in Melbourne in Australia.
Please send me an email.
I'll do that. Thank you so much.
I want my son to talk to you. And the Australian judges will be very, very supportive of marital mediation.
I'm sure they will, because they are very keen on sending people to mediation.
Australia is so far ahead of Massachusetts anyway. It's just been wonderful in what it's done, how the courts have responded to the needs of families in Australia.
Well,
Terry, it's wonderful that you've got Australia in this conference.
well,
Wonderful.
now I'd like to just open the doors up and say, well, we're going to have an opportunity for everybody to ask John questions, but just if we got one or two others that maybe have started with marital mediation already, or have some kind of hybrid thing that they're doing that might be similar. Does anyone from the audience want to tell us about how they might already be using marital mediation? We'd love to hear from you. So don't be shy. Wow, maybe this is that moment.
Persevere.
Nobody else? So yeah, so see, it truly is a new frontier. And that's why I decided that I was going to have John talk about this, because as our theme says, mediation is growing and expanding. And I think originally when we thought of the theme, we said, expanding frontiers, but really it's more, they're out there. We just need to explore them. And I think that I want you all to make sure that, John referred to his materials from time to time. So let me just tell you where you could find those. So with all our workshops, we have all their handouts are part of their, are on the website, and you just click on to the workshop that you're going to. And actually, Bouvier, why don't you tell them a little bit about how they can access John's materials, because I'm not sure I got that down.
Terry, also in the chat, there are questions if you can look
all right. So Bouvier, why don't you do that?
Terry, it's very easy. It's very easy. I love mediate.com. And I hope everybody in your audience should know mediate.com and just put /FISC. It's that simple. And
Yeah,
all my materials are right there,
yeah.
including everything on marital mediation and how you introduce it to your clients.
Okay,
And if any of you have any questions, please correspond.
all right. And then Bouvier, do you see anything there in the chat maybe? Let's see, anybody who just put something in the chat. I see that Patricia Van Haren, I think it is, said that she's done some postnuptial agreements and reconciliation agreements, but never called it marital mediation. But you want to tell us a little bit about those experiences?
That's exactly what it is a postnuptial agreement. That's exactly what it is.
And maybe she's not here anymore.
It's a legally binding contract after
There we
the
go.
marriage.
Patricia, can you join us on that?
Yeah.
One of the-
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So when I've done it, it's really been more of a position where, you know, maybe we're getting involved in a divorce and it's not really something that the couple wants, but they feel like they have no option. But I haven't done it at all in like a mediation setting where I've sat down, I've done the postnuptial agreement. I've done it collaboratively. I've said, okay, here, let's have your spouse talk to this other attorney and work out the terms of that. And then we're able to like dismiss the divorce and have a postnuptial agreement. But you know, it didn't occur to me to do it through mediation. I think this is so amazing. I'm really excited about it.
If you like doing it as a collaborative lawyer, you will love doing it as a mediator. One of the great things about postmarital agreements is the couple comes to you for a premarital agreement, and your first question is always, when's the wedding? They say, well, the wedding's in 2 weeks. You say, 2 weeks? You can't possibly have a premarital agreement that's going to hold up because it's right before the wedding. So don't do a premarital agreement, get married, and then do your agreement and take your time.
Yeah. Now I see in the chat another financial professional, Lily Vasilev. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And Lily, you say that you've been doing some marital mediation for a few years. We'd love to hear how that's going.
Okay, thank you. I'm buried under snow in Connecticut, so just like John in Massachusetts, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So it happened by circumstance. I never sort of thought of how I would get into it, but therapists had referred a couple to me with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and couples therapy wasn't making any progress, and it was a blended family, and it was very difficult. It was a remarriage for the first person, the other person had been widowed. And it was fascinating because every expectation and every value held around what they had gone through was completely opposite from the person that they had married. And their idea of debt was to spend more money so that they could be happier doing what they thought they would be doing. And it opened my eyes that this is a multidiscipline arena. It really is not just pure finances. It's not pure therapy. And I think the idea of a marital mediation with a team supporting a group is absolutely essential. And since then, I've been working with many couples on this.
Lily, are you familiar with Kate Hackinson in Hartford? Do you know her?
I know her very well. Yes. Yes.
Well, talk to Kate. She knows
Okay.
all about it. She's been
Yeah.
very involved in marital mediation in Connecticut.
Yes, I will. And so I've been
Great.
doing this from Fairfield County through New York. And it is something that is foreign to most people, but couples actually crave it. They really want a different roadmap.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Lily, for sharing.
you.
So now let's go ahead then. And hey, anybody have some questions for John? We've got a few minutes left before we're going to take you on your first break. So I see Bill Eddy trying to chime in.
Let me add some thoughts here.
Hey, Bill.
Hi, John. It's so good to see you again and hear your voice. And you should come down here where we have much less snow in Southern California. But what I wanted to say something and then ask you a question. So I have never promoted doing marital mediation, but what I have done is a few marital agreements with couples that came in to get divorced. And one thing that I found that I started doing with everybody is I give a little seminar after I've heard some of their initial questions on their choices. And I say, you know, I hear you're here to get divorced. I just want to let you know you can get divorced, or you can do a legal separation, or you can alter your community property arrangements by a written signed marital agreement, or you can just maybe negotiate some things to get along better. So these are some choices you have. Do you have questions about those? And I've had a few cases that said, well, yeah, I don't really want to get divorced, but I don't want to be responsible for his credit card debts. And I said, with a signed legal agreement, you can change from community debts to separate debts. And so I think it helps to give people a choice at the beginning. Someone had a question of, can a non-attorney do this? And it's important to know with community property, you have to do it right. You have to do it in writing and do it correctly if you're altering community property agreements in California. But my question, John, was if you did any follow-up, if you know 5 years later, I know in my cases, I ran into one couple 2 years later and they were still happily married. So I wondered if you have any follow-up.
I love that question. Do you ever initiate a call to your couples out of the blue and saying, do you remember me? I'm your mediator. How are you guys doing? I don't usually do that, but I sure hear from them. And like the couples who weighed in, this man whose wife just died, we're still in touch. And so, I mean, you decide as a mediator, what do I want? And if you decide you want to check in periodically 6 years later or whatever with your couples, do it, because they're all nice people. One of the great things about mediation is it's so self-selecting, and in the voluntary process, they're not assigned by the court. They're not there because they're required to be there. And what Bill Eddy is doing and what we all should be doing is helping them make informed decisions and making sure they know, nobody ever told us that we could have waited to do a post-marital agreement. We didn't have to hurry and do it before the wedding. Bill Eddy's making sure and you all are too as mediators, help them make informed choices. So if you decide you as a mediator are curious and you want to know how's a couple doing, call them up. My experience is that they have fond memories of you as a mediator and they'd love to hear from you. How are you, Bill? Tell us how you are.
I'm going to be speaking later this afternoon, so I'll bore people at that time. But I'm doing great and learning that life on Zoom makes the whole world connected. So I'm so excited to be part of this and to hear from you.
It's an
perseverance. Look at Bill Eddy, persevere.
Yep. All right, anyone else we got a time for maybe one or two more questions. Let's see, I see Jameson.
I think this is the conversation I've heard has somewhat answered this question, but we don't market ourselves as marital mediators, but we have over the last year gotten a lot of messages on Yelp saying, I want to protect my marriage. Can you guys help us? And we haven't really focused on that at this point, and obviously now I'm interested in that, but my concern is a lot of people might think that we're therapists at first when they're looking on Yelp or looking for someone to help their marriage. So how do you explain what you could do as a mediator and differentiate yourself from a therapist without confusing it?
Love the question. I say I'm a lawyer. I'm not a therapist. I help you enter into legally binding contracts. And you have to have a lawyer, and I will draft the agreement for you. I am a lawyer. I write binding contracts, and your lawyers will go over it. Are you a lawyer?
I am not a lawyer, but I have a graduate degree in negotiation and conflict resolution. So
fine. You just say I have a graduate degree, and I'll make sure you have lawyers to go over this. And it's not therapy. You're entering into a legally binding agreement. If you decide that's what you want to do, you may, if you're a therapist and you don't want to have them sign legally binding agreements, then do it anyway. And you just say, I'll help you mediate your marriage, and we'll figure out what you want the terms of your agreement to be. Or maybe they don't want to sign an agreement. It's up to them.
Communication
Valetti,
training.
the good mediator, says it's up to you. You decide. These are your choices.
Okay.
Or if you want something legally binding, I'll help you find lawyers who will help you do it.
Sure.
All
Thank
right,
you.
now, one last
That's great.
question, Bruce Fredenberg, and then we'll thank John in a minute here. But go ahead, Bruce. You have a question?
Yeah, I'm not an attorney. I'm a therapist, and I'm also a mediator. I was listening to Bill talk about the example of an agreement about separating, for example, credit card debts. And I'm wondering, in your experience, how does that really work out as a practical matter for the keeping the marriage together? If one person is draining family assets with maybe, gambling or credit card debt, I could see where it would be valuable, maybe if they moved on to divorce of at least one of them not being stuck with all the debt. But how does that work out as a practical matter if the couple think they've now solved the problem, but money's still going out the door?
That's a great question to end on. I had this couple, and they were terrified. In 2000, all his business went belly up, and his wife was a teacher, and they owned the house jointly, but he was still gambling and losing money. And they had 3 years of therapy, and they came to me and said, how are we going to deal with this? And I said, simple. Take the house out of your joint names and put it in the sole name of the teacher. As long as it's not a fraud on creditors, then you're totally protected. And they said, no one ever told us that. And they did it, and they're still happily married. So I would encourage you to use your skills to help the couples separate their finances, separate their debts, and protect themselves in that way.
Well, and on that note,
You're in a great position to help them do that.
let's end with his comment. And they're still happily married. So again, thank you so much, John. I know that a lot of us are going to take to heart some of your advice in getting into this field. And let's give some jazz hands and thank you for John Fisk. Wonderful, wonderful presentation. All right,
Terry is a delight to work with, and I've never been so well prepared as I was with Terry.
Thanks so much.
And Valetti or Ken Newman will tell you the best lawyer is the best prepared lawyer. That's true of the mediator too. Prepare and persevere.
That's for sure. All right, so before we let you go for a 15-minute break, I just want to remind you, okay, you're going to go in two separate paths now. We're going to either go to 1A, and you're going to join us for early dispute resolution. Israel leads the way. Or you can choose modern love, innovations in how we address family disputes. So please take your choice, and just let me tell you this, it is recorded. So if you have to pick and you're upset about that, you would be able to get the recording. And Bouvier, can you just briefly tell them how that will work if they want to access a recording, and then we'll go to break for 15 minutes. And those of you that need to go right away, go ahead. But Bouvier, if you could talk about the recordings.
Sure, I was going to talk about it at the end, but I can bring it up now. So next week you will receive an email with all of the recordings, and they will be available for 2 weeks. So you have 2 weeks to view any of the workshops that you missed.
All right. All right. So thank you. We'll see you in 10:30, I believe, right?
Let me double check. Yes,
Yeah.
10:30.
10:30. We'll see you all back, and click into your separate link for the workshop of your choice.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.